Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to this session webinar uh, by Mr. Toby Rao uh, from Washington, D.C. Um, Let me introduce a little bit regarding Agile Development of Society. Agile Development Society is basically around from since 2014, and its uh, purpose and mission is to uh, develop agile culture in Pakistan, uh, help professionals to come on board on one platform uh, to discuss the agile challenges. Um, uh, I'm representing uh, Agile Development Society, Lahore chapter as chapter leader. Um, Let me briefly introduce our today's guest, Mr. Toby Rao. Mr. Toby Rao is Washington, D.C. based Agile leader, speaker, and community builder. He is the founder and principal consultant of Torah Solutions, a boutique Agile company that is also an official affiliate of Enterprise Agility University. Toby draws on his 25 years of experience in IT organization development and operations management to better understand his clients' needs, mentor them effectively, efficiently, and help them reach their full potential and achieve their objectives. He is passionate about helping people, teams, and organizations improve their capabilities through coaching, advising, training, and mentoring. So now I would like uh, Mr. Toby Rao to take the stage and um, enlighten us on this interesting topic of NLP communication techniques for agile teams. Over to you, Mr. Toby Rao.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Norman. And thank you to the whole team for having me here. I am sharing my screen. Can you please confirm that the screen is being shown as well? Or, okay, perfect. Okay. So we will go ahead and get started. So thank you again to the whole team for having me on, and I'm very excited to be part of this. For a very long time, I have been wanting to speak in Pakistan. I've heard about the amazing development and growth in the Agile area that has happened over the last few years, and I'm very fortunate to be able to speak here and share what I know with you. So today's topic is NLP communication techniques for Agile teams. So the importance of communication in today's organizations simply just cannot be overstated, right? So much misinformation, misunderstanding, and miscommunication happens, almost every day in every team. And the irony is that we have so much technology, right, at our hands. We have smartphones, we have WhatsApp, we have so many online collaboration tools, but yet so many things get lost in translation. What is said sometimes is not understood. um, the response that we get sometimes that is misconstrued, and the million-dollar question is like, why does this happen? And the most simplistic answer is that the way the human brain is was created. So basically, human brains are hardwired to work a certain way, and a lot of that has to do with our beliefs, our context, our thinking patterns, and also the way we have trained our brain to respond to certain things. Today, what we're going to talk about is NLP is a huge topic. It might take days, sometimes years to even understand what it is. And obviously, given that we have just an hour, so I'm going to be focusing mainly on the communication techniques part of NLP. So I will be introducing what NLP is, and then bring it into the realm of Agile. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do. So let's go ahead and get started. So, a little bit of background. I think Norman did an amazing job of introducing me. So, I have mainly served in the US federal government area. Um, as a contractor, as a consultant. My agile journey started in 2005, and most recently, I have found my own company, which is not shown on the slide. That's happened earlier this year. And in the bottom are some of my certifications. So that's a little bit about me. So let's talk about why are we here today. Uh, I think I mentioned this already. We'll do a quick introduction to NLP, but before that, we'll understand what goes wrong with communication. We'll go a little deep into the communication model and then talk about how it works in agile teams. And most importantly, for me, the most important thing is a lot of times we go to these sessions, we go to meetups, we go to conferences, we learn a lot of things, but then we don't implement it in with our company, with our organization, with our teams. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time to see how I can share some tips and best practices so that when you go back to your organization on Monday, you are able to actually use some of this. So let's dive straight into the topic. So, why is communication important? So, communication is important, both in our personal lives as well as in professional lives. Uh, the important part is that by communicating, we are able to share what is in our mind, our thoughts. We are able to influence others. The challenge that happens is that the opposite of communication, which is miscommunication, what happens with that is that uh, a lot of times information is not relayed properly or understood properly. What ends up happening is that it causes a lot of ill side effects, right? So companies that are able to communicate clearly are likely to have, according to statistics, almost 50% more retention rate, right? And again, according to statistics, about $37 billion is lost each year because of misunderstandings, because of miscommunication. And again, by statistics, 57% of all projects fail because of poor communication. So basically, it goes without saying that communication is important, but avoiding miscommunication is also very important because, it just causes distrust, disengagement, and a lot of frustration. And then employees just leave the organization when they feel that they are not being communicated, they are not being part of the whole program, don't feel part of the movement, and they feel that they're just a number in the employee in the organization. They just leave, and that can be really bad for the organization, right? So that with that, let's move forward to understand a few things, right? So mere words don't communicate, right? Words, and and you must have seen it so many times, right? Especially in today's world, where we are kind of trained, we are expected by our leaders to say more in few words. Especially now, I think nowadays we communicate more by emojis than with words. And sometimes it's just one word, two words, especially when you're chatting, and nobody has time to read long emails. So the problem that happens is that you are not able to set the context, and a written communication especially is very cold, right? You don't know what kind of mood the person is when they're reading it. You don't know how busy they are when they're reading it, and sometimes it just gets misconstrued. But the point I'm trying to make here with this slide is that just words don't communicate. 70 to 90% of communication actually happens through body language, right? By seeing somebody, by seeing their emotions on their face, and the words that are coming out of their mouth, both together, give some meaning to you. So, all of us read this nursery rhyme when we were kids or children. Um, Are you guys familiar with this nursery rhyme? Mary had a little lamb. So let's dissect this to understand, what whether it actually makes sense, right? So depends on how you say it, or depends on how the person reads it. It could be Mary had a little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. It's gone. It's gone now. So sad, right? It's gone. Next is Mary had a little lamb. So at dinner, her family served lamb, and others had a lot, but Mary just had a little of it. And then another one, the last one is Mary had a little lamb, and now it's a sheep. The lamb has grown into a sheep. So three different meanings can come out of something as simple as Mary had a little lamb. So unless you communicate properly, unless you add a little few details, and depending on how your mindset is at that time, you could misunderstand or understand something that is being said. So the fact is that because of these things, communication becomes difficult. So let's jump to this. Communication is hard, right? Why does so much misinformation, misunderstanding, and miscommunication happen? And I talked about it in the beginning, right? So the fact is that talking is easy. When you're talking, you're just talking. But communicating is hard, because communicating is actually transporting certain words and ensuring that through language, whatever is in your head, you're able to transfer that without any loss to the other person. It becomes even more difficult because a lot of times, we are not actively listening to the other person. So we may hear certain thing, but we may understand something else, and sometimes even that gets filtered. So this is where neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, comes into play. So NLP's communication model basically creates these building blocks that, when you learn NLP, it helps you to think and communicate better. That's the main point of NLP communication model here, and we're going to learn about that today. So let's talk about information flow. How does information flow? So we as human beings, in our minds, we think in concepts, right? We think in emotions, we think in senses. Our brain actually creates, um, based on what it is feeling at that particular time. uh, it'll create a message. So what happens next is that your thoughts convert to words. But think about it, right? In your own mind, before you say something, what really happens in your mind? So you have an idea, that idea gets formulated, and then those ideas start taking shape into words. And then once that has happened, you convey those words, right? Through by either through writing or through speaking, you convey those words to the other person. So what happens next? The person or the people you're talking to, they receive the words. So we are just thinking in very simplistic flow. So the words you have spoken, the person receives it. Now, all the words you have spoken may not have been heard. It could be because of noise. It could be because of the mood of the person. Maybe the person is multitasking, but they receive some of the words. What happens next? Those words is data, right? Words are basically data that gets converted in their mind into information, right? That words become into thoughts, and then they actually think through the words that they received. They kind of decode it, and they try to understand what came out of that. This happens inside their heads. And then the last step, they understand, they derive meaning out of what came out of their head. So now look at this flow chart and please think about how many areas or how many steps where something could go wrong, where the words spoken can get misconstrued and the message could be lost, right, in translation. So many translations are happening here. Think about all the spaces or areas where your message could be lost. So Tim Urban said, our brains are binary. They want ones and zeros, but the real world is analog, and that is so true. All right, let's have some fun here now. Do you know these people? Who are these people? So Obama, Andre Agassi, Oprah, Russell Brand, and Tony Robbins. They are well-known celebrities that are uh, famous across the globe. They have all accomplished a lot in their life, and they're role models for a lot of people. Definitely leaders in their own space. They have worked hard and they've created a name and a brand for themselves. What do they have in common? You're right. Because this is an NLP focused session, NLP is what is common between all of them. All of them have learned neuro linguistic programming and they have utilized the power of NLP in their career. So this is, when I knew about Obama and I knew about Tony Robbins, but when I read recently that Russell Brand and Oprah, and so I was surprised. But when I learned about Andre Agassi, I was very surprised. I did not expect him to be a proponent and a follower and a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. So please do look it up and see what interesting things you can find about it. So in the interest of time, let's dig deeper and let me introduce what neuro-linguistic programming is. A lot of people, especially in IT, get confused between neuro-linguistic programming. When we say NLP, they think natural language programming, that's processing, and that's not the case. We are here to talk about neuro linguistic programming. So let me create a very simple baseline so that we can follow the rest of what we have for you today. So in very simplistic definition of it is that NLP or neuro linguistic programming, it is a study which which focuses on thinking, language, and behavior. And it really is, in a very simplistic manner, again, uh, a way of coding and reproducing excellence that will help you to consistently achieve the results, both in personal and professional life for you. So that's what NLP gives you. It really is a collection of tools and techniques that can help you with communication. And there are so many other models and modules within NLP, but communication is what we are focused on today. And I'm happy to share some resources and articles with you. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share more things with you. But today we'll focus mainly on the communication aspects of it. Um, another couple of things, the way they have described it is that it's the brain owner's manual. So if you think of your brain as a computer, NLP helps you to code, decode it, and help you program it so that your communication gets better, right? It is based on the science of modeling, and really, as I said, it's the art of communication. So a brief history of NLP. I'm not going to go into each and every bullet here, But basically, it was started in the 70s in the United States by two gentlemen by the name of Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Both of them were psychologists at that time, and they had read a lot of books and had done a lot of research, and they had found that the traditional psychological methods were not being successful in many ways. So what they did was they merged some new information from their research into it, and what they called it is neuro-linguistic programming. And a lot of their research was based on three main psychotherapists. You must have heard the name of Virginia Satir, which is called the Satir model of change, Milton Erickson, and Eric Perls, um, Fritz Perl, sorry. So that's a little bit of history. I talked about what NLP stands for. So neuro really is, your brain and all the other systems in your head that are connected to your brain, your whole neurological system. Linguistic is about communication, and programming is about how we can change things in our brain to act a certain way. So that together is neuro-linguistic programming. So let's dive a little deeper into each of these three words: neuro, linguistic, and programming. So neuro stands for, anything that happens with your brain. That's the central processing part of your human body. That is really the nucleus, the very center through which all the commands go to the rest of the body, right? When your brain stops working, basically you stop working, right? It basically is the command center for so all your pretty much everything that we do goes from there. It controls the rest of the neurological systems and your five senses. um, let's jump to linguistic. It really is to do with uh, communication. It is to do with how you communicate with others, how you communicate with yourself. And it's both verbal as well as non-verbal, right? So our body language, our expressions, all those are related to linguistics. So when we say linguistic, we think about language, but this is about all of the communication. So let's now talk about programming. As I said earlier, think of your brain as a computer, as an operating system. And programming is, we have our biases, we have our beliefs, we have our things that we have learned since we were a child. And maybe some things we understood well, some things we don't understand well. And the way we act and behave in real life is based on the way we were programmed. So that, in a nutshell, is neuro linguistic programming. So let's jump into the communication model. So this is a representation of the communication model. So basically, what the communication model does is it explains to us and makes it clear how we process as human beings. How do we process information that comes in from outside, and basically what happens once that information is received by our brain. And so this is a study of that, and this is very central to the whole to everything in NLP. But more importantly, as human beings, the way we act, the way we come across, the way we perform work, the way we have relationships with people, everything depends on how our brain processes this information. So there are a lot of different things, factors, uh, frameworks that are there related to NLP communication model. We're going to focus on a few simple things today. Um, so basically, our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, they all get stored in our brain a certain way. And NLP basically helps you to kind of decode that, process information, and helps you to think through and helps you to communicate better. Um, so we're going to talk. in more detail in the next few slides about what these external events are and how this happens. Um, and if there are questions, I can come back to this slide. Actually, you know what? Let me spend a couple more minutes on this slide. So I'm just going to be talking about this picture right here, right? So let's say it's an external event. Something happens, and uh, that information is being passed to you. So our brain um, has the capability to process a lot of information. So that information comes into our head, and then what happens is that we tend to filter that information, and we're going to learn in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. But we tend to filter that information because most of the time is information overload, right? We cannot, although so much information is coming in, we may or may not need all that information. Based on our current state at that point, we may just filter out some of that information. Sometimes we just delete that information. Sometimes we distort it. We maybe understand it incorrectly, and sometimes we just generalize it. And those things can totally modify what is actually coming into your brain. And then your brain cannot process so much information at the same time, right? Think of all the information as a backlog, and think of what your brain is processing as your work in progress. So it can do a few things at a time. So when people say that they're very good at multitasking, they're lying, because the human brain is incapable of multitasking. It can only do a few things well at a time. So once this processing takes place, um, and as I said earlier, right, your value, your beliefs, all those things, your memories, your biases, the decisions that you might have made in the past, help you to process that information. So for example, right, uh, you're coming back from work. It's kind of dark, and you park your vehicle and you're walking towards your house, and you see something on the ground, and you say, "Oh my God, it's a snake," and you jump back, and then you turn your light in your phone, and then you look at it. It was a rope. So in your mind, maybe you have a fear of snakes. Maybe you saw a snake there earlier. Maybe you saw a movie about a snake. I don't know. Maybe you have something else that's going on in your mind. But your human, your brain, the way it processed that information was that it's a rope, but you thought it's a snake. So a lot of such things can happen to us, at any normal day. It's all depends on the beliefs that you have in your head. So you have the internal representation. So what happens here? You saw the rope, but your brain thought of it as a snake, and that changes the state of your mind. That changes the way you react to it, and that changes your physiology. So in this particular case, what happens is your brain, your amygdala, which is the front of your brain, that's the part of the brain which is supposed to help you uh, get alerted when something is really going wrong, like a tiger shows up, or you're walking the street and a car shows up. It actually makes gets you like a jolt of energy. So basically your brain goes into fight or flight mode. So if a car is suddenly coming towards you and you were walking and you had not seen it coming, your brain basically makes you to jump and run away fast. Or in case it's a buffalo or a cow or something else coming, you might think about, okay, let me try to kind of scare it away, or fight with it, or run away. So basically your brain tells you what to do. And there are a lot of things that are happening in today's world, especially in Agile, where you're trying to make your amygdala, which is the front part of your brain, the front cortex of your brain, uh, to get calm down and not get too excited with things, and then form micro habits, which basically those habits reside on the back of your head. So there's a lot of studies happening around that. Very, very interesting. So anyway, so you saw the rope, you thought it's a snake, you had an internal representation. Um, you got scared because your amygdala got hijacked at that point, and then your physiology changes. Your face becomes pale, you're scared, and you start running. So these things can happen. So it all depends on what information is coming, how did you process that information, and what did your brain tell you to do. I hope that makes sense. And we're gonna learn a few things about more about in these about this in detail. Okay, so let's talk about primary senses and communication, how that happens. So this is very important because as consultants, as people who work in an organization, it is important to understand how do people communicate, how do people understand things, and so basically this is called a VAK model, and we're going to learn about that in this slide. So the first part is basically of VAK is visual. So VAK stands for visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So let's understand what is visual, and please try to think what kind of a learner, what kind of a communicator you are, whether you are a V, whether you're an A or a K. So the visual people, they learn by seeing things, by reading, and but when they're communicating, they might say things like, "It looks like it's going to rain today," or when they're trying to explain their point of view, they might say, "In my view, this is not going to work out very well." Or they want to see something, they'll say, "Let's take a peek at what the future looks like." So by seeing the words or hearing the words that they say to describe themselves, you can understand if that person is a visual person or not. So the next type of learning or communication style is auditory. These are people that learn best by listening, by hearing. These are the people who would probably get a an audio part of a book as opposed to a physical traditional printed book. They understand better when somebody is explaining things to them. They don't understand by just reading. They understand better when somebody explains things to them.